Okay, so today I'm going to speak a little bit about the project I did for my honours, which was about sampling reefs with drones. So you can see from the images there that there's a lot of ways of looking at studying a reef that range from in water to satellite, and that's all collecting information on like vastly different scales. But drones are a really great way of doing it because they allow you to collect really high resolution information at a scale, like on an area that's just way larger than possible with in-water sampling. And sampling from in the water is challenging because it's difficult to sample a large enough area to really know that what you're getting is happening across the whole environment. So I was looking at the method that you would use when you're sampling with a drone. So this is the traditional approach, which is orthomosaic, so it's stitched together from overlapping images, and it's great high-resolution imagery over a large area, but again, it's challenging to sample a large enough area of a reef to know what's happening. So drones are limited by battery life, and over the water, they're further limited by tides. You've got to think about the position of the sun, among other things. So my project was looking at maybe sampling more from like the perspective of an ecologist. So we collected images that were non-contiguous, they're not overlapping, and they were taken every 40 metres along a transect. So you can see that that enabled us to get information over a much larger area, which hopefully would capture like a better picture of what's happening in that part of the reef. So for some context, on the left is the whole reef, and this is just the bit that we were looking at. So it's just not possible to sample the whole thing. So we were looking at a way to start getting a better picture with the drones. So in total, I had 2 transect data sets and 2 mosaic data sets, and each of those is 1 drone flight. Sorry, so to look at it, I produced a classification to quantify live coral cover, which is a pretty common metric when you're looking at reefs. Then compared that classification between the 2 data sets, and then compared the attributes of the data sets and what you might use them for. So this is what the classification looks like. You can see it picked up the living coral around the edges of the colonies. That was done in Google Earth Engine. And the accuracy of that classification was pretty good, similar to published, and it was similar between the 2 data sets. So like the transect and mosaic images, there was no difference in the classification performance. The error between classes was similar between the 2 data sets as well, so that's good. Like knowing that the classification works on both data sets, it became about why you might select a data set. So to look at that, one of the things we looked at was the spatial autocorrelation, which gives you an indication of how related the areas you're sampling are to areas near them. So if you're trying to capture the variation and you want a good estimate of what's happening, you want a low spatial autocorrelation, which means you're sampling areas that are different from each other, so you have a better idea of what's there. In addition, the total image footprint from one transect is larger than the image footprint from a mosaic, meaning there's more reef that you're looking at, and the area over which that was sampled is larger again. So obviously, mosaics are good for some purposes. That is, they can be georeferenced, they're suitable for mapping. You can't use transects for that. But I guess the point of the project was that there might be a place for using non-contiguous imagery. It's still got spatial information, so we broke it into reef zones using existing maps of the reef. But it enabled a way of sampling over like a much larger area and getting a better estimate. So I guess it showed that there's a possibility for non-contiguous imagery having a place in sampling an environment.
Oh, Gary's next. That's perfect because you can leave it open at my folder.
I will do just that.
Thank you, Gary.
If mine decides to work. Oh, it does. Excellent.
We asked him that yesterday.
That photo is the Wet Tropics World Heritage Rainforest. The Wet Tropics World Heritage Rainforest is all around us. And that photo was taken somewhere within that. Personally, I took that photo from the comms folder. So that's where I know that it comes from. So, hello, my name's Gary. I work for Terrain NRM. Wonderful organisation. They give you title slides that look absolutely wonderful and get everyone asking questions, which is absolutely perfect. And my very short topic for today is more than just maps. Because GIS is more than just maps. I have a slide. I'll show it to you briefly. That's my slide. But the title slide actually looks prettier, so we might just go back to that and I'll just talk from that. This is primarily for later when you're looking back and you want to actually see a little bit more about some of the things that I might actually talk about today. There's a couple of links there. So what do I mean by GIS being more than just maps? Well, even if you think way back, when they first started making maps, and we had some trivia yesterday about Mr. Mercator and making projections which enabled us to visualise our world on a flat surface. Well, a lot of the early maps were very much an artistic domain because you had to draw them by hand. Fortunately, we don't have to do that these days because I'd probably be in a different industry. But the artistic nature of maps is all about communicating information from someone or something or for some purpose for a particular audience. And we're still doing that today. We're just doing it a little bit differently. Whilst there are still plenty of paper maps around and still plenty of uses for generating a paper map, these days a lot of the ways in which we communicate spatial information just isn't the same. It's much more interactive, it's online. We use things like the internet to communicate our messages these days and share the information. And what I'd like to do is just take you on just a little bit of show and tell on some of the things that Terrain has produced and just highlight that, well, there's actually a lot of ways in which we can communicate the information. And if you haven't been making more than just maps in your GIS journey, it's certainly something to look into. I love the fact that an organisation like Mango's Mapping has got an employee now who sort of specialises in some of the more communication side of the skill set, which is actually really cool. Making the web tools, communicating our spatial information in new and interesting ways, and making videos like the one we might see very soon from Alistair. Because video is actually a really good medium for communicating information. When we as an organisation, Terrain, look at the ways in which we communicate, we've made a bunch of story maps, we've got a bunch of videos and things, and it's that sort of information that we find really engages with our audience, not necessarily a paper map. Some of the other really cool ways in which communication of spatial information can be achieved is by adding an extra dimension. So, where we've got a projection to communicate something on a flat surface, we don't have to have a flat surface these days because we've got 3D. You can print in 3D. You can make a model. And all of a sudden, the conversation can change around the way in which you're doing something. And I don't have very much time left for my show and tell, so it might be that you have to get a hold of my presentation afterwards and click on the link. The one thing that I would highlight is our NRM plan. So the Wet Tropics Plan for people and country is the NRM plan for the Wet Tropics region. The Terrain is the custodian of the plan. I helped write it, design it. It's a website. It's not a book that you put on your shelf. It's a website that we update regularly that you can visit. There's a whole bunch of interactive mapping tools on there. There's a whole bunch of story maps. And if you're looking for something really interesting, we've got 9 catchments in our region, and each catchment has an interactive story map as a catchment profile. It's probably one of the more interesting places to start looking at some of our story maps and the adventures that you can have in the catchments of the wet tropics and see places like this. And I managed to turn 2 slides into 4, or is that 5, because of the amount of times I've flipped backwards and forwards. And I'll hand to the next person now.
I'm going to talk about Operation Blowdown. And
Microphone just a little bit.
yeah, thanks.
Z value is a little high.
Thanks. This really comes out of a need that I feel to communicate some things that are passing out of living memory. And they're not that easy to find on the internet, because if you look up Operation Blowdown, it tells you how to clean out boilers. I should have had my glasses on. So
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
I think that the photographers could have done more to capture the effect of the explosion. It was a test up at Iron Range in 1963, a combined test with Australia, the UK, Canada and the US, and it was designed to find out what effect a nuclear explosion had on a tropical rainforest. Now, it's not supposed to be a nuclear explosion. There's a science magazine that says it was, but the government, in reply to that, said it didn't really happen, and then they said it wasn't nuclear. So you got your choice: scientist or politician. However, it happened to be a unique piece of tropical lowlands rainforest, and it covered an area of about 14 to 15 hectares, and it removed everything. And before they did that, do I get time out?
Stop the clock.
Before they did that, and I got this document from the Black Vault, but as you see, they say that you can, and I'll use that in my defence. Close the doors, Anne. Oh no, where are we going? Oh, there it is. And it has been unclassified after 68 years. They declassified it after 50 years. And this document, I won't go too far into it because it's 219 pages long. This document in extreme detail gives the operation. And what they did before they blew up this piece of forest, they actually did an inventory on all the trees. So they got girth, height, type, and a strength based on the type of tree. So they knew more about these trees than probably any other piece of lowland forest in the area, and then they blew it up, as you would.
I reckon Ted Bullpit had something to do with it.
Now, you can't be GIS without a map. So, this was up the back if anyone wants it later. So the test site is there. This is Portland Roads is there. They didn't think to put the Aboriginal settlement that was 6.5 miles away from it. They moved the settlement afterwards. The locals did. This is the old road, and if you look at documents, it's got about 4 different locations. You know, reasonably within measure. Yes, Anne? Pardon? No. No, you don't put things like that. You know, because the people of the Lockhart River settlement, there's no mention in the document of public consultation or advising them. And in 1963, they would have got a heck of a shock. You imagine that just happening 6.5 miles away? Okay. So, somebody asked me, they wanted to know if it really happened, and somewhere up there's a plaque to it. So if you find the plaque, it must be true. Well, it's in Wikipedia as well. In fact, Wikipedia gives one of the locations. And so that's it.
Well done.
Thank you. See. It'd be great. There's research papers in this. There's research that could be done, and you got the assistance of the deep web. There's and what I'd ultimately like, and I think
We'll do the discussion in the...
it's questions. Yeah. Ask that question again. Thanks, Anne. Chewing into your time.
I'm
Sorry,
so tempted to say, screw the video, Bob, keep talking. Like, that is such an interesting topic, and it's something I've been interested in for a long time.
Did you go upper level?
I'd heard about it.
The video should be there. I just can't remember what it's called.
Well, it'd be a video, wouldn't it? MP4 file. Wait, that's fungus.
That's the slideshow.
All right, one more. Let's go into Gary's search history.